covenant and of the covenants being founded upon Christ, in which Calvin clearly, unmistakably stated that the covenant promise is for the elect alone, and it's not for all the children indiscriminately and promiscuously, because the legitimate children of Abraham are the elect, and in which he also said the preaching of the gospel in the sphere of the covenant is governed by predestination, so that God wills the salvation only of the elect children, and in which he said the covenant is founded upon Christ. There are other statements in Calvin, and particularly, as this person who has been reading in Calvin points out, in Calvin's explanation of Genesis 17. As I indicated in my speech last night, the doctrine of the covenant was not fully, systematically, and perfectly developed by John Calvin. The fundamental elements are there. And I also acknowledge there are inconsistencies in Calvin with regard to these matters of the covenant being controlled by election. In response to the particular references and the question raised on the basis of those particular references that have to do with Calvin's explanation of Genesis 17, I want to reaffirm for the questioner and for us all that it is evident beyond the shadow of a doubt that for Calvin, the covenant is governed by election. If we will agree on that, we have established the main thing. In the second place, with regard to seemingly contrary statements by Calvin, particularly in his Genesis commentary on chapter 17, that of course is a very important chapter on the covenant, God's establishment of his covenant with Abraham and Abraham's seed, Genesis 17, verse 7. In that part of his commentaries and elsewhere, when Calvin does say the covenant is established with all the children, all the physical children, it is evident that what Calvin wants to emphasize is that the non-elect children of Abraham and of believing parents have an important position that those not born to believing parents do not have. They are involved in the administration of the covenant, and that gives them a special responsibility and a special guilt. So it's the administration of the covenant that Calvin wants to emphasize in statements such as have been quoted in the question. They were all circumcised. They all had the sign of the covenant. They were all instructed in the same way. And that puts the illegitimate seed of Abraham in a special and specially guilty category, and that must be preached. In the third place, I don't claim that I have read everything that Calvin has written, but I have read a great deal that Calvin has written in the course of my life. And I would dare to say that with the rare exception, and I do not know of an exception, but certainly in this Genesis 17 commentary, and I would like everybody here this morning to read what Calvin has to say on Genesis 17 in his commentary on Genesis. That's the first volume of his set of Genesis commentaries. And this was not pointed out in the question. That's why I want, and it doesn't have to be, but that's why I would like us all to read that. There, and I would say in virtually every other passage where Calvin makes these statements that the covenant is established with all the children, he adds, and he does this in the Genesis commentary, it is not made with them all in the same way, nor are the children with whom the covenant is made the same kind of children. He explicitly makes the distinction. Only the elect are the legitimate children of Abraham, with whom the covenant was made in a special way. Now, am I satisfied with the rest of his language? I wouldn't put it the way Calvin does. Things have developed beyond Calvin's day. I would emphasize with Calvin, the covenant is administered to them all. But the issue is this today. Here's the question. Is the covenant established with all the children in the same way? And are all the physical children of believers children in the same way? Or are there two classes of them according to election and reprobation? And I have no doubt what Calvin's answer to that would be.
I saw the underlining and the bolding by your colleague on the end. Would you like to add anything orally?
Yes, I would. I believe Prof is exactly right in that understanding of Calvin. And furthermore, I think it's very important that if we would be faithful to Calvin, that we take his advice. And before Calvin wrote his commentaries, he'd written the Institutes. And if you read the introduction to the Institutes, he counsels everybody who's going to read his commentaries that if they want to know what he actually believes in detail, what his theology is, that they must not read the commentaries because he's going to be very brief, but rather they must read the commentaries in light of the Institutes, in which he fully develops his own doctrine at his time, of course. So that's a key point, I think. So, and as you read the Institutes, you'll find what Prof has just said is exactly true. And furthermore, when it comes to the general promise that is spoken of there, when you read the whole of Calvin, and I'd really encourage everybody to read Calvinism, especially on predestination, but when you read it, you find that Calvin is using the term general promise with reference to the outward call. So it's the proclamation of the promise of God that whosoever believes shall be saved. That is not a general conditional promise in the way that those who hold the conditional covenant would maintain, but rather it's a part of the outward call through which God is realizing his purposes according to predestination. And that's very important you understand that. We can't just read the writings of Calvin and take out words and say they have the same meaning that we have today. You have to be read in the whole context of his argument, and as you do that, it becomes quite apparent that he's not contradicting himself and leaving the principles of predestination at certain points. It's his terminology that you need to understand in light of his whole argument.
I had two things. The first is that Calvin was not involved in the controversy over the conditional covenant. What I mean by that is that controversy, as a controversy, did not exist in Calvin's day. Controversy over the conditionality of salvation, to be sure. Controversy over the conditionality of election, to be sure. But the devil had not yet taken the next step and so influenced the church that the controversy over a conditional covenant came to the fore. It was going to, very shortly,